Hey friends, what up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud Beis, Daf 12 of Masechta Sukkah. I don't really know what to tell you about Daf Yud Beis except that I do, but it's hard to gauge if it's complicated or not, so I'll leave that to you. Today we discuss for the first time I think we're going to see, possibly we've alluded to it, but we're going to see the machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer about what exactly, when it says Ki b'sukkos o shavti es b'nei Yisrael, what are these sukkahs? We're also going to discuss the sort of definitions of kosher schach, and then we get to a new Mishnah where we discuss using bundles of like wood and stuff as schach, and interesting nafkamin is there in terms of tasav v'lo asui, something that's called gezeras ha'otzar. So interesting in Yonim. On today's daf, we're actually really going to start on daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis. We've got a little bit of work to do over there. I just figured that it would be a nice sugya to start with as opposed to end with yesterday. So we're about 10 lines from the bottom of Yud Aleph Amud Beis by the two dots Ze'aklal Kol Davar Shemakabel Tumah V'chulei. So the Mishnah had said that in order for schach to be kosher, it needs two, I think maybe arguably three requirements. One is that it grows from the ground. It has to come from the ground. One is that, and this is like the arguably third one, it cannot be connected to the ground at the time that you use it as schach. And the third is that it cannot be mikabel tumah. If it's mikabel tumah, it's not kosher schach. Okay, it has to come from the ground and cannot be mikabel tumah. And at the time that you use it, it cannot currently be connected to the ground. It has to be separate from the ground. Zok the Gemara. So how do we know this? How do we know these rules? How do we know that schach needs to come from the ground and that it cannot be makabel tumah? So Rish Lakish says Rish Lakish Amar Kra. Well, we have a pasuk that says Ve'ed Yailem in Haaretz. Well, the clouds would come up from the ground. It's a pasuk in Parshas Bereishis, I believe. It says Ve'ed Yailem in Haaretz Ve'ishka is called Pnei Adama, that there was a mist or clouds would come up from the ground and water and irrigate the ground. So ma'ed davar she'eino makabel tumah v'gedulam min haaretz, just like these clouds, as the pasuk says ve'ed yailem min haaretz, that these clouds would come up from the ground. So we see that clouds are something that come from the ground, and clouds are not makabel tumah either, as Rashi points out. The very interesting Rashi actually, in Mekabel Tumah Delo Nemra Tumra Ella, that the only places where the only contexts for Tumah are Bekalim, vessels, V'ochlinu Mashkin, food and drinks, V'adam, and people. That's it. V'zeh nenu echad me'ele. And clouds fit none of those categories. So therefore clouds are not Mekabel Tumah, and they come from the ground, as it says Ve'ed Yalam in Arts, that the clouds would rise up from the ground. So sukkah davar she'ein mekabel tumah v'gidulo min haaretz. So therefore also a sukkah, which is kineged Ananay kavod, when it says ki b'sukkos hashavti es b'nei Yisrael, it's talking about that the Eibishter provided Ananay kavod, these clouds of glory for the Yidden when they left Egypt. So since the sukkah is a reference to the Ananay kavod for the clouds, so memele, just like clouds come from the ground and are not makabel tumah, so then also the schach needs to come from the ground and cannot be mikabel tumah. Now, Zok the Gemara, that's all fine and good if you in fact hold that the sukkah was keneged ananei hakavod. But what if you are of the opinion that when it says ki basukos hoshavti es b'nei Yisrael, that I settled the b'nei Yisrael in sukkahs, according to the opinion that refers to actual huts, that the Eibishter provided physical huts so that the Yidden, would have protection, would have houses to live in. So ma'ikele meimar. Well, then it has nothing to do with clouds. And if the sukkahs have nothing to do with clouds, well then how do you know that schach needs to come from the ground? It cannot be makabel tumah. The Tanya, as we talk learn in the Brayso, ki b'sukkos hoshavti es b'nei Yisrael, that when the pasuk says that I settled the b'nei Yisrael in sukkahs, Ananay kavod hayu divrei Rabbi Eliezer, says Rabbi Eliezer, that refers to the clouds of glory. that the sukkos ushavtes b'nei Yisrael, those sukkahs are referring to the Ananay kavod. Rabbi Akiva ad gezok, sukkos mamish asulaim, that God made for the Yidden actual physical sukkahs. So there you have it. Rabbi Eliezer says that kibbutz sukkos l'shavtes b'nei Yisrael is a reference to the Ananay kavod. Rabbi Akiva says it's talking about sukkos mamish. So now, hanicha l'Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Akiva ma'ika l'meimar. So therefore, tying it back into our Gemara, I understand Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. I understand how, according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says that sukkahs are referring to Ananay kavod, I understand why the schach would have to come from the ground and not be makabel tumah, just like clouds come from the ground and are not makabel tumah. However, according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that the sukkahs have nothing to do with clouds, well then how do I know that they have to come from the ground and not be makabel tumah? Right, the schach. Kias Rav Dimi, so Rav Dimi came from Bavel, from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Ki chag ha-sukkos taise lecha. So you have to make for yourself a chag ha-sukkos. A chag, like a chagiga, which we're going to say, is compared to sukkos. Chag ha-sukkos, chagiga, sukkos. Makish sukkah lechagiga. We compare sukkah to the chagiga, the korban chagiga, the shamil chagiga that you bring on the Yom Tiv, on the Shalosh Regalim. Machagiga davar sheinu makabel tumah v'gedula min haaretz. Just like the korban chagiga, an animal, is something that is not makabel tumah, as we pointed out in that Rashi earlier. The only things that are makabel tumah are vessels, food, drinks, and people, not animals. A live animal is not makabel tumah. Gidula min haaretz, and it grows from the ground, which is an interesting conceptual thing. We're going to end up projecting this anyway, so don't get too into it. But we want to conceptually say that an animal grows from the ground because it eats, the things that grow on the ground. So if an animal eats grass and grass grows from the ground, so memela, an animal grows from the ground. It gets its sustenance from the ground. So sort of indirectly it grows from the ground. So it's gidulo min karka. Don't worry, we're going to reject this. There's all sorts of kashas you can ask. In the meantime, we're assuming that, well, you see, that chag asukos, we compare the sukkah, the construction of the schach for the sukkah, to the korban chagiga. The korban chagiga is not makabel tumah when it's alive, and it grows from the ground because it, eats things that grow on the ground. So, av sukkah davar sheinu makabel tumah v'gedula min haaretz. So also the schach for the sukkah needs to, not be able to be makabel tumah, as well as it needs to grow from it has to come from something that grew from the ground. Okidoki, frek the Gemara, ima chagiga ba'alei chayim, af sukkah nami ba'alei chayim. But frek the Gemara, the chagiga that we're talking about is a live animal. I should say that the schach needs to be live animals. Chevik, can you imagine that? Live animals for schach. Alright? Kiasa Ravin am Rabbi Yochanan. Now when Ravin came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, which interestingly, apparently that's like a thing. I didn't realize that. How did I see this? I think maybe I looked up Rav Dimi or something in one of those books that tells you about the Tanoim and Amoraim. And I think maybe over there they pointed out that often Rav Dimi will say something in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Kilu Ki Asa Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi will come from Eretz Yisrael to Babel and say something in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and it will be like missing something. And then Ravin will come and kind of clarify things. So, if that's the case, then this would be an example of that. So basically, Rav Dimi said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that we know that schach needs to come from the ground and not be makabel tumah from the fact that that's kilo chagiga comes from the ground, it's not makabel tumah. We then ask the kasha, but I don't understand. Chagiga is alive. What, I would have to have live animals for schach? So, or at least I would be able to. So comes Ravin and kind of clarifies things. Ki also Ravin Amar Rabbi Yochanan. When Ravin came, he said the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Omar Kra, the pasuk says, Be'ospecha migarnecha miikvecha. New friends, what does the pasuk say? Chagasukos ta'asil chashivas yom. Make for yourself sukkahs for 7 days. Be'ospecha migarnecha miikvecha. When you gather from your granary and from your vineyards. Be'psoles goren v'yekev akosum medaber. So Ravin says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that when the pasuk says "Ba'aspecha migarnecha miikvecha," when you gather, that you make your sukkah, when you gather from your granary and from your vineyard, it's talking about b'psoles goren v'yekev akosum medaber, the psoles of the goren v'yekev. What does that mean? You have a granary, you take your grain, you take your wheat, and you store it away in your granary. And then what's the psoles? The psoles is like the stalks, the parts that you don't want, right? The parts that aren't food. the things that grew from the ground and are just kind of pshute kleitz kind of things. They're not food, they're not ochel, they're not makabel tumah, the pshute kleitz. You separate those things, and that is what you use for your schach. Fact the Gemara. Maybe I'll say it's talking about the grain itself and the vines itself. Kilu, the grains with the wheat, the vines with the grapes. How do I know that it's talking about? Or even, what does Rashi say? I don't know what Rashi says. But, Akashin imat, exactly as I said. Yeah. And therefore, that would include the wheat or the grapes, which are makabel tumah. Reb Zera says, Reb Zera yekev ksiv kan, v'yev shel sakech bo. So says Reb Zera, look, the pasuk says yekev, it says, grapes, sure. But you can't use, how are you going to use, practically speaking, how are you going to use grapes as schach? So because you can't use grapes as schach, so therefore we use the kind of stalks, the psolas, as schach. Maska for Rabbi Yirmiyah asked the kasha, ve'ima yain karush, haba mishnir, shudom ligulei dvela. So Rabbi Yirmiyah challenges Reb Zera and he says, wait, but that's not necessarily true. I can actually technically use wine as schach, because there's wine there's like the certain congealed wine that comes from shnir, and that congealed wine is hardened. I actually can use it as schach. So Rabbi Yirmiyah says, wait, why don't I say that when it says ba'ascha migarnecha miyikvecha, it mamish means that I can take wine and use that as schach. Which wine? How can I use wine as schach? It's a liquid. Not necessarily. The wine that comes from shnir is congealed, and therefore I can put it on top of my sukkah. So maybe when it says it does actually mean use real wine as your schach. Interesting. Reb Zera says, Reb Zera, says Reb Zera, wow, here we thought that we had a good answer, that, it says your vineyard, but we can't actually use wine as schach, so therefore Memela must be talking about the vines without the grapes. And comes Rabbi Yirmiyah and he chops it in half with an axe. He basically asks a amazing question, which is, wait, I can use congealed wine as my schach. So Rav Ashi Amr says, Rav Ashi, migarnecha v'lo goren atzmo, mi yikvecha v'lo yekev atzmo. Chevy, you got that? The pasuk says mi garnecha, from your goren. It's not saying use your goren. It says use something from the goren. What's the thing that you take from the goren, that you take from the granary? The psolas. You take the parts that you don't want. You have all the grain in the granary, and then from there you remove the stalks. From the grapes you remove the vines. So it says migar nechav lo gar natzmo, from your granary, but not the grain itself. You want to take the psolas, the stalks. Mi yikvecha, from your winery, v'lo yakev atzmo, but not the wine itself, but rather the empty vines. Rav Chizda Amar says, Rav Chizda me'acha, from the fact that the pasuk says in Ezra, to Ahar, go out to the mountain, vaviu alezayis, bring leaves of olives, v'alei eitz, and leaves of v'alei eitz shemen, leaves of probably olive trees as well, v'alei hadas, and leaves of myrtle branches, hadasim, v'alei tmarim, and leaves of dates, date palms, I guess, v'alei eitz avis, as well as leaves also of hadas, hainu eitz av. So period. 1 second. So I think that's the proof. That meaning, this is the pasuk in Ezra when he's telling them to prepare for Sukkot, and we see that all of these things that he's listing are things that grow from the ground and not makabel tumah. So we see that it must be that memele for the Sukkah, it has to be things that grow from the ground and not makabel tumah. Frekti Gemara, hainu eitz avos. In that pasuk, we basically say hadasim twice. First we say hadas, then we say eitz avos. Lemaisa, they're both the same thing. So Rav Chizda hadas shota, the Sukkah ve'etz avos, the Sukkah, that you can use a hadas shota for a Sukkah. Hadas shota is basically a hadas that's possible for your lulav, but it's pshute kleitz. You can use it for your sukkah, for your schach. Whereas eitz avis, to have proper hadas that we're going to learn out in Perek Lulav Agazon in a few weeks, that from eitz avis that they have to be kind of 3 leaves all together, in one kind of row, woven together, so to speak. So there's special halachos when it comes to the hadasim that you use for the lulav. But for the schach, you can use even a hadas shote, even essentially a puzzle hadas, whereas for the lulav, it needs eitz avos. It needs to be this special kind of hadas. Okay, very good. So the Maisa, we learn out that the schach, the materials that you use for the schach, need to grow from the ground and cannot be mekabel tumah. Okay, friends, new Mishnah, interesting discussion coming up. Chavile kash, v'chavile eitzim, v'chavile zrodin, bundles of straw, bundles of wood, bundles of, zrodim, what did we call, cane. Cane, does that help you? Cane? What the heck is cane? Well, I'll tell you this though. Zrodin is something that's come up, I think, in Masechta Shabbos. Zrodin are these things that when they're moist, you can use them as animal food, and when they get hard, you can use them to burn as firewood, as fuel. So chavile kash v'chavile eitzim v'chavile zrodin, bundles of straw, bundles of wood, bundles of cane. You cannot use them for your schach in bundle form. But if you unbundle them, no problem. And all of them are kosher for the walls, meaning walls, use whatever you want for walls. There's no special inyanim there. These things that are possible for schach, you could use for walls. But these bundles, do not use them for schach when they are in bundle form. Unbundle them first. Zokt the Gemara Amar Rabbi Yaakov Shama'is Mine to Rabbi Yochanan Tarte. Says Rabbi Yaakov that he heard from Rabbi Yochanan two halachas. Okay, Chadaha, one of them being this halacha, this Mishnah, that we do not use bundles of wood, different kinds of wood, or things that are kosher schach. We don't use them in bundle form. Actually, I don't want to say that. Let's just say what the Mishnah says. Bundles of straw, bundles of wood, bundles of cane, do not use them for schach. That is one Mishnah that Rabbi Yochanan taught. The other one being v'idach, and the other one hachotet begadish la'asos lo sukkah ein a sukkah. That if you have like a big pile of grain, let's say, and let's say you have wheat, I don't know, you have a big pile of wheat, and wheat probably wouldn't. How about this? You have a big pile of hay, of straw. You have a big pile of straw, which is kosher sukkah, or which is kosher schach. We said in a bundle it's not kosher schach, but individual, if to use straw as schach is fine. So let's say you have a big pile of straw, and what you do is you take your shovel and you start shoveling out a sukkah. You're not constructing a sukkah, you're digging out the sukkah, right? You have a big hut, a big pile of straw, and you start hollowing out the inside and removing the inside of the pile, and memele, in the end, you can walk into this pile and you kind of dug out the structure, so you didn't construct, you didn't build a sukkah, you didn't put any schach on top of it. You just kind of removed, you hollowed it out, and then memele, you were left with, the structure that you can walk inside and it's got a roof and everything, but you didn't actually build the roof. You didn't place the schach, more like the schach emerged when the inside of the pile was hollowed out. So those are the two halachas that Rabbi Yochanan taught, right? It says Rabbi Yaakov that Rabbi Yochanan taught these two Mishnahs, the one that we just learned, which is that you're not allowed to use these bundles of wood, straw, cane for schach. The other one being that if you hollow out a pile in order to make a sukkah, ein a sukkah, that is not acceptable. It's a pasul sukkah. Now, continues Rabbi Yaakov, Chada mishum gzeres otzer, v'chada mishum taisav l'mena asur, v'lo yadayna, heminav mishum otzer, v'heminav mishum taisav l'mena asur. Chav, who could tell me what that means? It means that Rabbi Yaakov reflects on these two Mishnahs and he says, look, I know that Rabbi Yochanan explained the rationale for both Mishnahs, but I remember what each rationale was, but I don't remember which applies to which. Okay, let's break that down a little bit. He says that one of the Mishnayos, Rabbi Yochanan explained the reason for it being Gezeras Otzer. What's Gezeras Otzer? Gezeras Otzer means it's a Gezerah. It means that Mida Oraisa, one of these sukkahs is kosher. Mida Oraisa, one of these sukkahs, and he says, I don't remember which one's which, but one of these examples, whether be it the bundle on top, you're using a bundle of wood for schach, or be it hollowing out a pile, one of them is kosher mida oraisa. Mida oraisa, technically speaking, it's kosher. However, the rabbis don't want you doing it out of concern that there might be situations when you're storing away, when you're like storing away something, or let's, what's the best way to explain this? Basically, it's a gezerah. It's hard to explain it without sort of like giving it away, but alright. Let's just say it like this, and it's kind of like leading you on a certain path, but I don't know a better way to explain it. Let's just say we take the case where a fellow is taking a bundle of straw, and he puts it on top of his sukkah, okay? Now, he's just putting it there to dry. He's not putting it there because he wants it to be a sukkah, right? He's got a structure, he's got let's say a 4-walled structure, whatever it might be, obviously at least 2 in a tefach, and he's got some structure, and he comes back from the field. Feels like I'm giving away the Gemara, but whatever it is, I don't know how else to explain Gzeras Otzer. That he comes back from his field, and he's got his bundle of, wood, and he's got to dry it out, so he puts it on top of the structure that he has. He has no intention for sukkah, has no intention for shade, he literally just needs to dry out his bundle. And then he comes back 2 weeks later, and he's like, oh wow, it's sukkahs. I'll just use it as my sukkah. Now that's not going to be a kosher sukkah because of tasav lo min asui. You didn't make it as a sukkah. You would have to at least pick it up and put back down the bundle with the intention of sukkahs. So therefore, out of concern, so mida oraisa, there's nothing wrong with using bundles of wood. But we're concerned that what would happen in a situation where somebody comes back from his job, comes back from his field, puts down this bundle of wood to dry out, which would be a pasul sukkah, but then he'll see it 2 weeks later and be like, oh, this is a great sukkah. Perfect. I don't have to do anything. I already have a sukkah. Which is not true, because you don't have a sukkah, because you didn't put it there with the intention of sukkah, or even with the intention of shade, and therefore it's a pasul sukkah, and therefore out of concern of that situation, of gezeras ha'otzer, we're concerned that out of a situation where you might be putting this grain away for storage, so out of concern for that situation where it would be a pasul sukkah, we say don't even do this case. Don't, so whatever, just to keep in the same context, don't even put bundles of grain on top of your sukkah intentionally for shade and for a sukkah. Even that would not work out of concern for this other case where you might leave it there just to store away and to dry out, whatever it is, where it would be a pasul sukkah, and you might think that it's a kosher sukkah, but it's a pasul sukkah. So therefore, out of concern for that case, we say don't do it even when you're doing it l'shem sukkah. Alright, a little bit of a roundabout way, but alright, what do you want me to tell you? So, says Rabbi Yaakov, I feel like I already kind of like gave away which one's which, but pretend I didn't just give it away. So says Rabbi Yaakov, look, Rabbi Yochanan taught us 2 mishnayos. One is our mishnah, which says that you're not allowed to use a bundle of wood or straw or cane for schach. The other mishnah being that you're not allowed to hollow out a pile of, let's say, hay or straw. You can't hollow out a pile. Actually, straw is probably better than hay because, hay isn't human food, whatever it is. You can't hollow out a pile of straw. And says Rabbi Yaakov, one of them is mutar mida oraisa, is kosher mida oraisa, but the rabbis say don't do it anyways out of some kind of a gezerah. And the other one is mamish asur mida oraisa because of tasav lo min asui. That it says you have to make for yourself a sukkah. It can't be made mimele. It can't be made, in a pasul way, and then used as a sukkah. You have to make it in a kosher way. So now, let's start from the beginning of the Gemara. Yeah, I feel like it was like hard to kind of explain, but it's really not difficult conceptually. Amr Rabbi Yaakov says, Rabbi Yaakov Shmas Mine de Rabbi Yochanan Tarte. I heard 2 halachas, 2 mishnayos from Rabbi Yochanan. Chadaha, one of them being this one, that you're not allowed to use a bundle of, straw, wood, cane for schach. V'idach, and the other mishnah being achoted b'gadish lashus lo sukkah in a sukkah. That if a fellow hollows out a pile in order to make a sukkah that way, it doesn't work. One of these 2 mishnayos is kosher mida oraisa. However, midirabanan they say don't do it out of gezerah. Gezerah for whatever certain other situation would be where it would be pasul. And one of them is mamash also mido oraisa, because you have to make a sukkah and not use one that's already made in a not kosher way. And therefore, if you don't make the sukkah, so then it's possible. If you don't construct it milchatchila in a kosher way, then it's possible. And says Rabbi Yaakov, I don't remember which Mishnah is explained as being a situation of Gezeres Otzar and which one is a situation of Taisav Lo Mina Asoi. I don't remember which halacha applied to which Mishnah. Rabbi Yirmiyah says Rabbi Yirmiyah, well, we could just figure this out logically. The Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Chia bar Abba said the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Says Rabbi Chia bar Abba, the name of Rabbi Yochanan, how come we say that you may not use bundles of straw, bundles of wood, bundles of cane? Because sometimes a fellow might come home from work, come home from the field, ba'erev at night, and he's got his bundle of straw or of wood or of cane on his shoulder. And he puts it on top of his sukkah, on top of his structure that he has there, not for shade, not for the mitzvah of sukkah, but just to dry it out. So clearly that would be apostle sukkah. But then v'nimlach aleh l'sikuch. And then he says, oh, you know what, l'maisa, now that I look at it, sukkah is coming up, and this looks like it would be a great sukkah. And he says, perfect, I don't need to do anything at all. I have my sukkah memele. But it's apostle sukkah. But the Torah says you have to make for yourself a kosher sukkah. You can't just find something that technically fits the bill, but was not made for shade, was not made as a sukkah. Those are two separate things, right? Meaning even if you say that you don't have to, even if you're like Beis Hillel, that you don't have to make a sukkah l'shem sukkis, the chag, but you still would need it to be for shade, right? But this was neither, and therefore it's apostle sukkah. So therefore, even though theoretically, if I were to take bundles of straw, wood, cane, and put it on top of my sukkah for sukkahs, so that it's kosher schach, technically midoraisa, it would be kosher. However, in a situation where I came back from the field with these same bundles, and I just needed to dry them out, so I put them on top of this sukkah, with no intention of shade, no intention of the festival of sukkahs, in that case, it would be apostle sukkah, and therefore, we're concerned that you might then look up at your sukkah and realize, wow, this could technically be a kosher sukkah, and think that you have a kosher sukkah, but it's not kosher because it has to be taisa. You have to make it properly, not one that was made in. You can't just use one that was made improperly. So therefore, it would be apostle sukkah, and out of concern for the situation where you came back from your field, we say you can't even milichatchila put these bundles on top of your sukkah. So we see it's a gezerah, it's a gezerah sa'otzer. So, midaha mishum gezerah sa'otzer, and now says Rabbi Yirmiyah, from the fact that we could see through the explanation of Rabbi Chia bar Abba in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that using bundles of straw and wood and cane is a problem because of gezerah sa'otzer, out of concern, out of this gezerah, then that means that memele, digging out the pile, hollowing out the pile to use as a sukkah, we say is not a kosher sukkah. That's because of taisav and also that you have to actually construct, you have to make the sukkah properly, not use something that came memele, right? Meaning you actually have to put schach on top of a sukkah. You can't just hollow out the sukkah and say, look, you can't just hollow out this pile and say, look, there's a structure I can go into and the top of it is straw, so memele it's a kosher sukkah. No, you actually have to make it as a kosher sukkah. Okay, fine. There you have it. Rav Ashi asked the Ka'am. No, I think we skipped. Rabbi Yaakov was not aware of this explanation of Rabbi Chia bar Abba in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and that's why he wasn't sure which one was which. Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi, Atu chavile kash v'chavile eitzim mishum gzeres otzer ika mishum taisa v'lo min asui leka ve'achotet begadish mishum taisa v'lo min asui ika mishum gzeres otzer leka. Rav Ashi says, well, theoretically, actually, I could make the argument hafuch. Or at the very minimum, say that both of these things could apply to both, right? Meaning, we were saying that the issue with using the bundles of wood and stuff is because of Gzeres HaOtzer, but says Rav Ashi, I can also argue that it could be an issue of Taisav Lo Min Asui, because if I, as we explained a minute ago, if I have this structure that has these bundles on top that were not placed there, right? Meaning, to say that it's an issue of Gzeres Otzar means that Mida Oraisa it's kosher, but just Mida Rabbanan we say that, out of a Gezerah we don't want you to use it because of some other case. But it could also mamish be also Mida Oraisa. How would these bundles be also Mida Oraisa? Well, it would be also Mida Oraisa in the case that I come back from the field and I put the bundles on top of the sukkah with the intention of just drying them out. Well, in that case, it's not also Mida Rabbanan, it's mamish also Mida Oraisa, because I put them there to dry out, not for schach. Right? So meaning, to explain that that the problem of using bundles is only also midrabanan is not really true. Yeah, sure, it's also midrabanan in the case where I put the bundles there with the intention of schach. We're saying, well, even though you're putting the bundles there with the intention of schach, you're still not allowed to use it out of the gezerah of the other case. So therefore, yeah, in that case, it's kosher midoraisa, but possible midrabanan. However, says Rav Ashi, you could also argue that the case of the bundles of wood for schach is taka also midoraisa, and it's a violation of Taisav Lo Min Asui. How? Well, in the case where you come back from the field and you put the bundles on top of the sukkah for schach. No, you put the bundles on top of the sukkah to dry out, and then you wake up the next day and you say, oh wow, look, this is actually a great sukkah. Well, in that case, it's actually also midoraisa, because of Taisav Lo Min Asui, it's not also midorabanan in that case. So it says Rav Ashi, look, when it comes to the case of the bundles on top of the sukkah, sure, there's a case where it's only also midorabanan, but there's also a case where it's also midoraisa because of Taisav Lo Min Asui. And then says Rav Ashi that the other case also, when you hollow out a pile, sure, there's the case of when it's also midoraisa, when you hollow it out and it's just made memele, but you didn't actually construct the sukkah, l'shem sukkah, with proper schach. You just kind of dug out, hollowed out a pile, and then you said, hey, look, memele, I have a sukkah. So sure, that's also midoraisa. But says Rav Ashi, I could also make an argument to say that case is also midorabanan, which is, well, what if I then knock down the ceiling of that pile and then put back the schach, the straw or whatever it is, with the intention of it being a sukkah? Maybe in that case, still it would be asur midorabanan out of a concern for the case of when I hollow it out and I don't knock down the schach and reconstruct it. So maybe in that case it would be also midrabanan. So therefore, says Rav Ashi, I can't necessarily just assume that by the bundles it's the Gzeres HaOtzar, and that by hollowing out a pile it's Taisav Lo Min Asui. I could theoretically argue that Taisav Lo Min Asui could apply also to the bundles, and that Gzeres HaOtzar could also apply to the hollowing out the pile. So answer the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan would respond to you in defending his position to say that our Mishnah of the bundles is Dafka Gezeres Otzar, and the Mishnah with hollowing out the pile is Dafka Taisav Lo Min Asui Midoraisa. Because Rabbi Yochanan Amalach Hacha, if we look at our Mishnah, the Katani E Misakrin Boyen, it says, don't do this. Look, we don't want you using bundles of wood or whatever for schach. Lechatchila. That means, preferably, we don't want you to do that. Who? Meaning, if we look at our Mishnah, it says, look, we don't do that. Midaraisa you can, but we don't do it. Even if you look at the words of the Mishnah, it implies that midaraisa is kosher, and our Mishnah is talking about where midarabanan we say don't do it. Where we say, look, even though you're putting those bundles there with the intention of schach and it maker, and then it's kosher, we don't want you to do it out of Gezeres HaOtzer. So Rabbi Yochanan says, look, you can even imply in the words of our Mishnah that by the bundles we're talking about Gezeres HaOtzer. Hasam, whereas over there, by hollowing out the pile, the Katani Eina Sukkah. Over there, Mamish says it's not a sukkah, it's a pasul sukkah. Afilu di'eved midaraisa nami ein a sukkah. It means even midoraisa, it's not a sukkah, right? It says ein a sukkah, it's pasul. It's a pasul sukkah. So in that case, it must be talking about it's a violation of taisav lo min asui, and it's not even a sukkah bichlal. As opposed to over here where it doesn't say it's not a sukkah, it's a sukkah midoraisa, but don't do it because of gzeras ha'otzar. But over there, by hollowing out a pile, it says ein a sukkah. It's mamish not a sukkah. It's pasul. It's nothing. It's a violation of taisav lo min asui. It's not a sukkah midoraisa zeu. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan says, look, you can imply from the language of the Mishnayos that the Mishnah about putting bundles of schach on top of the sukkah is talking about gezeras otzar, whereas the Mishnah of where it says don't hollow out a pile to make a sukkah, that's talking about taisav lo min asui midoraisa. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Zot Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav Schacha bechitzen zcharim ksher b'nekeves psula. Okay, says Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav that if you imagine, I don't know, I guess I can imagine, I don't know much about bows and arrows and all those in Yonim, but I guess if you, I don't know, what I understand is that an arrow, I guess, has kind of two parts to it. There's like the, I guess, long, like stick part of the arrow, and then there's like the part that you don't want to touch you. It could be dangerous, lemaisa, which I guess is the point. So there's like the metal part at the end, which is like sharp. So the shaila is, how do you connect the two? How do you connect the stick part with the deadly part? So lemaisa, the answer is like lots of things. There's a male part and a female part, right? So there's two ways you could do it. Either that the stick part kind of goes into the arrow part, the stick part and the arrow part. So that would be the stick part being male and the arrow part being female. The other option, of course, being that the stick part can kind of have some kind of base kibul, some kind of receptacle, and that the arrow goes into the stick part into that receptacle. So either the stick part could be male or it could be female. So it says, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Schach bechitzen zcharim, if you use for your schach these sticks that are male and go into the arrow and the arrow is female, so then kshera. So the male sticks are kosher for schach because it's pshuta kleitz. No base kibul, it's just, wood or whatever, so it's kosher for schach. B'nekeves psula, but if the sticks have a receptacle and you would put the arrow into the stick, so then it's possible because it has a base kibul. It's no longer pshute kleitz, it has a base kibul. So it's makabel tuma and it's possible. So the Gemara says, well, it's obvious that I can use the male sticks because it's pshute kleitz. Well, I may have thought to say, enochinami, but I am not able to use the female sticks, so I might think that, well, since I can't use the female sticks, maybe I shouldn't be able to use the male sticks either, just in case, so that I don't end up using the female ones. No, kamash malan, that you are allowed to use the male ones. B'nekeves psula pshita. So now the opposite is true as well. Of course, I cannot use the female sticks because they have a base kibul. They have a receptacle, which makes them a kli, which makes them makabel tumah. So I can't use them. Ma'odetema base kibul also the malos me kibul kamash malon. And for the Gemara, well, I may have thought to say that enochinami, that the female sticks have a base kibul, but once I put the arrow into the stick and make the shidduch, so I'm never planning to take out the arrow ever again. I'm going to shoot it, I guess hopefully kill somebody or at least scare them away or whatever it is, and that's that. So therefore, I may have thought to say that enachinami, the stick has a base kibul in it, but the base kibul, once you make the shidduch with the arrow, is never going to be a base kibul ever again. It's never going to be, it's going to be stuck there forever. And therefore, I may have thought to say that that's an I don't know, it makes it different. It's going to be filled up forever, and therefore I might have a havamina for that reason to say that it wouldn't be a regular kli, and maybe I guess it would be considered pshutik kleitz or whatever it is. It's not. What does it say? Hasu namaz lo shmei kibul. So it's not considered a regular receptacle, which I guess is something that's generally multi-use. And therefore I might think that it would still be kosher. Schach, komashmala, no, it's not. Okay, fine. Says Rabbi Yochanan, pishtin, psula. If you use for schach combed flax, no good, because I guess it's a kli. Behutzne pishtin kshera. If you use unprocessed flax, well then it's okay, because I guess it's not a kli. Behushne pishtin, but if you used partially processed flax, ein yodeh. Mao, I don't know if you can use hushne pishtin on partially processed flax. Okay, fine. Vehushni atzman en yodea, and also I don't know what's the deal with unprocessed or partially processed flax. Manafshach idayek velo nafitz, if it is beaten but not combed, hushne karile, well then it's called hushne. Avaltari velo dayek hutzne karile. But what if it was soaked but not, was it combed or something? What was it? Wait, did I not? Wait, where am I? If it was soaked but not beaten, so then maybe it would be hutzni, or dilma, or maybe tari velo dayek nami hushni karile, maybe soaked but not beaten is also hushni. I don't know. Well, what do you guys think? I have no clue what I just read. I mean, do you want me to read it again? Alright, I'll read it again. Fine. So I'm not sure. Idayik velo nafitz, if you beat it but you don't comb it, hushni karile, is that called hushni? Aval tari velo dayik, but if you soak it but don't beat it, hutzni karile, that would be considered hutzni. Now hutzni we said was unprocessed. Alright. Okay, so if it's aval tari velo dayik hutzny. Okay, if it's soaked but not beaten. Alright, so I guess beaten but not combed is like, I guess, further along the way than like soaked but not beaten. Alright, so that would be considered hutzny, which is unprocessed. So dilma, or maybe tari velo dayik nami hushni karile, or maybe if you soak it but don't beat it, it's already considered partially processed. Dude, I don't know, don't use flax, leave me alone. Don't use flax, just use, there's so many things that people use. Use like those mats that people sit on. Use freaking those roly-poly things. Use palm branches, like leave me alone. I don't want anybody asking Babylon Talmud, I don't want anybody taking photos of like soaked but not processed or beaten flax and, no, post photos and stuff, but don't use them for your schach and ask me. You know what the answer is going to be. He said, I don't know. That's the answer. All right. Well, apparently the Gemara doesn't really know either because they don't answer the question. Chaver, get ready because I think tomorrow is going to basically be a lot of this kind of stuff. Akoponim. So, Chaver, that was Daf Yud Beis of Masechta Sukkah. So, way back at the beginning of the daf, we discussed what is a sukkah. We saw that interesting machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Eliezer says that a sukkah is a reference to the Ananay kavod. Rabbi Akiva says that no, sukkah is mamish, like a physical structure. And then that came up in the context of trying to figure out how do we know that schach must be A, come from the ground, and B, something that is not susceptible to tumah. So initially we wanted to say, well, because it's ve'ed yailim in aretz, that clouds come from the ground and they're also not makabel tumah. So memela, also the sukkah, the schach needs to come from the ground and cannot be makabel tumah. To which we said that makes sense according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says that the sukkah is ananei kavod. But if you say Rabbi Akiva that the sukkah is sukkahs mamish, physical sukkahs, so how does he know that they have to come from the ground and not be makabel tumah? So first we wanted to, Rav Dimi said the name of Rabbi Yochanan that it's learned out from the Chagiga, Chag HaSukkos. We compare the Sukkah to the Chagiga. The Chagiga is a live animal, it's not makabel tumah, and also it grows from the ground because it eats from the ground. To which we say, yeah, but then what? Can I use live animals for my schach? Of course not. So Ravin then says that it comes from that when you gather from your goren and from your granary or from your vineyard, and it's talking about the psoles goren. It's talking about the stalks of the wheat, the vines of the grapes without the grapes on them. Although, would you be allowed to cut down a grapevine in order to use for schach? I wonder. Do you cut down grapevines? And fruit trees we generally don't cut down. Unless maybe it's just like leaves and stuff that we use. I don't know. Maybe you leave the vine intact. I don't know. My friend Donnie Friedenberg, he's a winemaker. He could probably tell us more about this. Maybe there are parts of the vine that you like prune away and stuff. Maybe that's what we're talking about. And then we saw the opinion of also, whose opinion was that? There was Rav Chizda, who quotes a pasuk from Ezra, that they would use different trees and branches and stuff for sukkahs. So they're not makabel tumah, and they come from the ground. Then we learned a Mishnah about using bundles of straw, of wood, of cane for your schach, and ultimately we said, even though midoraisa it's permitted, midorabanan we say don't do it because we're concerned that you might, xeris otzer, you might just put the bundles there to kind of dry out and then think, oh, I'll leave them for my sukkah, but the fact of the matter is you can't do that because you didn't leave it there for schach or for sukkahs. So out of concern in that case, we say don't even do it milichatchila. We also, in terms of trying to understand that, we also brought up the case of when you hollow out a pile in order to make a sukkah, we say that that's a problem of taisa v'lo mina asui. And then at the end, we got to different kinds of things that you should or shouldn't use for schach, and I think that we're going to kind of continue on that discussion, continue on that train tomorrow, which is curious to see how that goes. Cheb, have a great day. Peace.